Hey, cool kids. Welcome back into the Cool Grandpa podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about a group of people who have an enormous impact on our grandchildren's lives, but who may not always hear all the encouragement that they need from us. And I'm talking about fathers. And before we jump into this podcast about fathers, what I want to do is remind you, if you haven't done so already, please go over to YouTube, look up the Cool Grandpa podcast, like and subscribe to that channel, because that's a great way for you to stay up to date. Watch some of the conversations that I have with the people that I interview, and in general, just kind of help us get the message out about how cool grandpas are. So, I want to jump in today and talk about fathers, our sons, our son in laws, and the men who are raising our grandchildren. A few weeks ago, I shared an episode about honoring the mothers of our grandchildren. And today, going into Father's Day weekend, I want to talk about this group of people who sometimes can get a little bit overlooked. And when we talked about the sacrifices mothers make, the pressures they face, and the way that grandfathers can support them, I just really felt like we should also be talking about fathers and have this conversation focus on them. Because if we want strong grandchildren, we need strong mothers and fathers. And if we want strong parents, we need fathers who feel supported, respected, and encouraged. The reality is that fatherhood is challenging. Many fathers today are trying to balance careers, marriages, finances, parenting responsibilities, and their children's emotional needs all at once. They're trying to be providers, they're trying to be leaders, they're trying to be present, they're trying to be involved dads, and sometimes they're carrying all that weight without much encouragement. I mean, a lot of times as a father, I know that we would get a little bit of encouragement here or there, but our lives were very compartmentalized. And what I mean by that is we had our work life, we had our recreational life, we had our family life, and we may have had even a few other lives mixed into that. Maybe we were a scoutmaster or a baseball coach or something else. And very rarely did people see us just as a father, a son, a husband that had all these compartments within us. A lot of times, like I said, we were very compartmentalized. And I think today that as grandfathers and fathers of older children, we have a unique opportunity. We can become one of the most positive influences in the lives of fathers who are raising our grandchildren. And that support doesn't just help them, it helps our grandchildren too. Before we talk about supporting today's fathers, I want you to think back to when you first became a dad yourself. Do you remember those days? The uncertainty that you had, the exhaustion. Do you remember everything that was coming at you at one time? The fear that you might mess this thing up. I remember looking at my own children and wondering if I was capable of being the father that they needed. In my own case, I married into a ready-made family. I stepped into a family that we already had a 5-year-old and we already had a 2-year-old. And so I jumped ahead of some of the normal progression, let's say, that a number of fathers have, where I just walked right in and then all of a sudden I'm a new husband and I'm a new father at the same time. So there was a lot of anxiety that I had. And I do remember looking at those kids. And at that time, I hadn't even adopted them yet and wondering if I was going to be capable of being the father that they needed. And so I can just imagine the same anxiety of not wanting to screw them up. Most of us didn't have instruction manuals, whether you were there at the birth or you came in as a step parent later. We learn through experience. We learn through mistakes. We learn through trial and error. And if we're being honest, there were days when we felt overwhelmed as new dads, days when we questioned ourselves, days when we wondered if we were doing enough. Now, imagine facing those same challenges while also dealing with smartphones, social media, online bullying, economic uncertainty. Today's fathers are navigating those challenges and some of the challenges that we never faced. Now, this doesn't mean that their job is harder than ours was. It just means that it's different. Some of the things that we had to deal with raising our children are things that today's fathers don't have to deal with. That's why everything's different, but it is also the same. And when we recognize that, it becomes easier to lead with empathy and judgment. I remember talking with a father who was coaching his son's baseball team, and we were connected with the team. And I know this guy worked long hours. He was constantly tired, and yet he spent evenings and at practices and weekends at the games. And we know that this is for the season, right? But one day I noticed that another parent thanked him for volunteering, and he just kind of shrugged it off. He said, "Thanks, no problem, my pleasure." And then an older gentleman, maybe one of the players' grandfathers, walked over and said something really simple to him. And I knew this because we were having our own conversation when this grandfather came over. And he said something along the lines of, "Your son may never, ever remember each game, but he'll remember that his dad showed up and was there for him and was part of the experience of playing baseball." And that father got a little choked up, not because the comment was profound, but because somebody noticed, somebody who maybe because it hit differently, because it was a grandfather, an older man, they came up and they really meant it. They acknowledged the sacrifice that this father was going through in trying to juggle career and life and baseball. And fathers are like that. They're working hard, they're showing up, they're doing their best, and almost nobody says anything. For me, cards and some of the accolades around Father's Day are nice, but it doesn't hit quite the same way as having somebody who's respected and somebody who's a part of the family or part of the community or part of the team come up and say something to you. I think one of the greatest gifts that a grandfather can give is noticing the hard work of another father, especially a younger father, noticing that effort, noticing the patience, noticing the consistency, noticing that growth, because encouragement is fuel. And fathers need that fuel, especially when life is getting tough. Now, let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable. As grandfathers, we sometimes have opinions, or I should say, we almost always have opinions, lots and lots of opinions. And that comes from having experience, that comes from having stories that has our bumps and bruises, our wins and our losses along the way. And we've had lessons that we've learned the hard way. And sometimes we feel compelled to share all of them immediately, frequently, whether somebody's asked or not. And a little bit of that is a comparison, and some of that is going to be, I think, also just the way that you start to go, hey, we've had this shared experience. We've both have done different things. You've done this thing, I've done this thing. And so when we share that information, sometimes in the wrong context, in the wrong setting, that can come across not the way we intend, let's say. But here's something I've learned. There is a big difference between wisdom and control. To me, I think wisdom says, I'm here if you need me. We're that emergency fire alarm or the fire extinguisher, right? Break glass in case of emergency. I think control says, let me show you how to do this. Wisdom respects. I think control interferes. Our sons and son in laws are adults. They are the parents. They are the ones making decisions for their families alongside their spouses or their boyfriends and girlfriends or whatever the case may be. That doesn't mean they'll always make the same choices we would make. And that's okay. Different isn't necessarily wrong. And also, different could be a lack of lived experience. And by them making decisions, they gain experience. One of the most powerful things I think a grandfather can do is communicate trust. Trust that they are capable, trust that they love their children, trust that they are learning and growing. When fathers feel trusted, they are more likely to seek our advice. When they feel judged, they're going to be pulling away because I don't need that aggravation. I don't need that pressure. I don't need more self doubt creeping into my role as a father, as a provider, as somebody who's just trying to make their way through life, let's say. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking especially about son in laws because this relationship can be especially important and a little tricky. Son in laws enter the family from the outside. They are trying to build a marriage. They're trying to establish themselves as fathers. He's out there trying to create his own traditions. And sometimes that son in law wonders where he fits in. I've heard many men say that they never fully felt accepted by their wife's family. And honestly, that's unfortunate because a supportive father-in-law can become one of the greatest blessings in a man's life. Imagine what it means when a father-in-law says to a son-in-law, "I'm proud of the way you love my daughter. I appreciate how involved you are with our children. I can see how hard you're working. You're doing a great job." Those words to somebody who feels like an outsider helps bring them closer in and helps them feel recognized and seen. In fact, it may be more important than we've ever seen in terms of the anxiety that a lot of young men are under as they become fathers, as they step into this role. Because many men spend years wondering whether they're measuring up. Let's face it, I think one of the biggest things that wives tend to do, right or wrong, is kind of measure us as husbands to their fathers, especially if they've had good relationships with their fathers. We kind of get that ruler placed against us. And that's not always a bad thing, but sometimes that can be a drawback too, because we do realize that we're being measured against almost an ideal, let's say, and that ideal can still be alive and well and kicking. And I think it can cause a little bit of not anxiety, but maybe comparison, that we feel like we are being compared as a son in law. So I just want to remind you that a little encouragement can go a long way with our son in laws. So, what does support actually look like? Let me offer a few practical ideas here. First, we want to tell them what you admire about them. Tell our sons, tell our son in laws, what do you admire? Don't assume that they know. Say it, text it, write it. Make sure that you bring it up when you talk to them, whether it's on a phone call or an in-person visit, whatever. Tell them specifically what you see. Tell them that you see how hard they're working, what the sacrifices they are. Second, respect their leadership, even when you disagree with minor decisions. Not every parenting choice requires commentary from us. Sometimes silence is wisdom. Sometimes we've got to give them room to make mistakes as well as create their own victories. Third, love them without condition or help them without condition. And that goes along with love as well. Watch the kids every once in a while. Offer practical assistance when it's asked for, when they're kind of maybe brainstorming at the kitchen table over a pizza with everybody and they're thinking about, do I do this or do I do that? Then you can offer some practical assistance or guidance and then just leave it. Let them make the decision, but you go ahead and put your input in. You may offer them a different viewpoint or an insight that they hadn't considered. Offer to help them with projects around the house, provide them support during difficult seasons, and do it without keeping score. Get away from, I help you with this, you help me with that. They're not our buddies that we go over and we help move and then we need them to pick us up at the airport. Just do things because you can and because that you want to support those sons and those son-in-laws. The fourth is, I think, ask questions. Instead of giving advice, immediately ask, how's fatherhood treating you these days? What's been your biggest challenge lately? How can I help? What's been on your mind? What's going on at work? The questions open doors, just like with when we talk about connecting with little kids and those grandkids, making sure that we're not asking yes, no questions, make sure that we're asking very open ended questions where people can jump in and they feel like they can share, that they can talk, that we can listen to what's really going on with them. Make sure that you ask those questions. You know, the next one I think that jumped to mind was supporting their marriage. And this may seem strange, especially coming from the guys, because we don't typically get into this kind of discussions and we don't typically get into these kinds of things. But I think it's one thing that can set us apart as an intentional grandfather, as an intentional father, is that, we can give the gift to give our grandchildren of helping their parents stay connected. Again, we can offer babysitting. We can encourage them to have date nights. We can encourage them to speak positively about their spouse. We can make sure that they know that healthy marriages have ups and downs, that they have disagreements, that there's times where you may love each other, but you may not like each other at the moment. And those healthy marriages and our support of healthy marriages create stronger families, which again goes right back to this is how we support our grandchildren. The next one that came to mind here is really, breaking generational patterns. Many of us grew up with fathers who loved us deeply, but didn't always know how to express it. If you're a Gen X father, grandfather now, our dads probably grew up in the silent generation or were part of the greatest generation. And that was still a point as they grew up where, for a large part, I think you're seen and not heard. If you're a child, it's just understood that you have to accomplish, you have to do things to warrant some of that love, at least being, shown and expressed. And so I think a lot of our fathers didn't know necessarily how to express that love. Some of them certainly did. So, I am painting with a broad brush. So your life experience could be very different. But if I had to zoom back and take a 30,000-foot view of what that greatest generation, what that silent generation grew up, it was heads down, work hard. Hard work and going through hard times is just part of life, and you better know how to work your way through it. So some of us, although we grew up being loved, our fathers didn't always know how to express it. And some of us, like I said, heard encouragement on regular basis. Others rarely heard it at all. Perhaps your father never told you how proud he was of you. Maybe he showed love through hard work rather than words. Maybe they were busy working during your recital. Maybe they had things that they had to take care of on weekends versus going to your baseball games or your football games or your soccer games, whatever it is. And sometimes maybe that criticism came easier to them than praise because they wanted you to be better. They wanted you to excel at whatever it is you're doing. Now, here's the thing. We have the chance as grandfathers and fathers of older children to continue the best parts of our family legacy while improving on the parts that could use a little work. We can become the kind of older men we needed when we were younger. We can offer encouragement where there was silence in our lived experience. We can offer affirmation where there was uncertainty. We can offer presence when there was distance. And in doing so, we don't just impact our sons and our son in laws, we impact our grandchildren as well. Because when fathers feel like they are valued, when fathers feel like their hard work is seen, those fathers can often raise healthier children. And again, it's kind of a weird circle of we want the best for our grandkids as an end result. And to get to that end result, we've got to make sure fathers are as strong as they can be. Now, one thing I've learned through my journey as a father and grandfather is this, that people rarely forget how we make them feel. They might forget some of the little things we do here and there, but the way that those little things make them feel, that's what they're going to be remembered. And so years from now, grandchildren may not remember every birthday gift. They may not remember every family gathering, but they will notice and they will remember how family members treated one another. They will notice whether grandpa encouraged dad. They will notice whether grandpa respected mom. And they will notice whether relationships were marked by support or criticism. In many ways, we are helping create the emotional climate of our families. And that climate can become part of our legacy. The what we leave behind, what our impact is. When everybody talks about how we made them feel, what our impact was with their parents growing up, with them as our grandkids grow up, they're going to remember that part. So look, as we're wrapping up, let me leave you with a challenge for this week. Reach out to your son, reach out to your son-in-law, and tell them one thing that you genuinely admire about him as a father. Man, I got to work to get that out. And this isn't as a worker, as a provider, as a homeowner, but it's as a father. Tell him what you've noticed. Tell him what he's doing well. Tell him why his children are fortunate to have him. And you might be surprised how much those words really mean. And you might be surprised by how much they help to strengthen the family. Because I think one of the things that we don't know about as fathers is really what our sons are truly going through. I think it's normal as fathers, men, as we grow up, again, going back to that compartmentalization, is that we don't know what compartment has all the darkness in it, all the uncertainty about work, all the uncertainty about the direction our life is taking. And I think that getting a text message from a father-in-law, from a father mentioning how important that son or son-in-law is can be absolutely huge. And it can help give them the strength to make it through. And when they have to go to that compartment, and let's just call it a compartment of darkness, when they have to go back in there, they've got some armor, they've got some reinforcements. They know that somebody cares about them, that somebody sees them, and that somebody's encouraging them. One of the greatest gifts I think a grandfather can really give to their grandchildren is helping their father succeed. And I want to just, thank you again for spending this time with me today. I hope these thoughts around our sons, our son-in-laws, boyfriends, whatever the case is, the fathers of our grandchildren. I hope that this has encouraged you. I hope that this has given you a little bit of insight. I hope that this gives you something that you want to maybe do a little bit more of, which is encourage those dads and make sure that those dads know that they are a valuable team player and that you appreciate having them on the team. So, hey, if this episode has encouraged you, do me a favor, share it with another grandfather, share it with another father who cares deeply about his family. And I want you to remember too that I've got a ton of resources over at my website. So go to check out those resources. I've got fun stuff in the shop. So check out mouse pads, check out the hats, check out the koozies now that I've got over there, the polo shirts. And if you're so inclined, make a purchase that helps support the show, that helps support me. And we'll just keep chugging along with this Cool Grandpa podcast. But I want you to know how valuable I think you are and how much I appreciate you listening to this podcast and supporting me. Whether you buy something or not, that's regardless. But I appreciate the fact that you spent this time with me, letting me share with you some of the things that I think are important to help strengthen families and especially strengthen those grandkids. So, enough from me. Go out, have a great day, have a great afternoon. And until next time, remember to stay cool.